The rhythm was always the same. 1, 2, 3. His voice from the other side of the door. Calm, measured, utterly relentless. 4, 5, 6. My heart hammered harder than the numbers, my breath grew shallow, and my hands trembled as I gripped the sheets. By the time he reached 90, the world around me dissolved. At 99, I stopped breathing altogether. And at 100, the door would open and my life would break all over again. That counting wasn't a game, it was a countdown to hell, and I knew exactly what awaited me on the other side of that door. For years, I lived waiting for those numbers, trapped in a nightmare that repeated itself with the precision of a broken clock. But today, many years later, I am here to tell you how I survived, how I managed to break that chain, and how I found the strength to start over when I thought there was no hope left. Good morning. My name is Patricia, and I am 79 years old. I live today in a small house near the coast, surrounded by the warmth of my grandchildren and the sweet scent of jasmine that blooms on my balcony. My life is full of light now, but it hasn't always been this way. Please subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell, and leave a like on this video. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from today? There was a time when light seemed like a distant memory, something that belonged to other women, not to me. There was a time when every sunset brought with it a terror that still, after all these years, clutches at my heart. The story I want to tell you today begins many years ago when I was a young bride. I married Larry on a warm June day, surrounded by white flowers and everyone's blessings. He was a charismatic man, you know? Tall, with that confidence that makes you feel protected, with kind words that knew how to soften your heart. In the beginning, everything was perfect. Too perfect, perhaps. But I was young, deeply in love, and I didn't yet know how to recognize the warning signs. I didn't know that behind those gentle eyes hid something dark, something that would turn my life into a silent nightmare. We lived in an isolated house far from town. Larry said it was better that way, that we would have more privacy, more tranquility. It will be our little paradise, he used to say, stroking my hair. And I believed him. I didn't understand that the isolation wasn't for our sake, but for his control. There were no neighbors to call out to for help. There were no prying eyes. There was no one who could hear. The first weeks of marriage were normal, or at least they seemed that way to me. Larry was attentive, considerate. He brought me coffee in bed in the mornings, he helped me with the chores, but then slowly things began to shift. First, they were small things. That skirt is too short, Patricia. I don't want other men looking at you. Why did you talk so long with the baker today? Aren't I enough for you? Phrases that sounded like jealousy, possessive love. But it wasn't love. It was the first layer of control, the first brick of a prison being built around me, and I didn't realize it. Then came that night, the first time I heard the count. It was an evening like any other. We had eaten dinner in silence. Larry was restless. I could see it in the way he gripped his fork, in the way he looked at me. After dinner, he told me to go to the bedroom. "Go wait for me," he said, with a tone that allowed no argument. I obeyed. I went upstairs, my heart beginning to beat faster without knowing why. I changed, put on my nightgown, and sat on the edge of the bed, waiting. And then, from the other side of the closed door, I heard his voice. 1. My body stiffened. What was he doing? 2. My heart started pounding harder. 3, 4, 5. I got up from the bed, confused, terrified. Why was he counting? What did it mean? 10, 11, 12. I rushed to the door, put my hand on the knob, but something stopped me. A visceral feeling, a primal instinct that told me not to open it, not to find out what was on the other side. 20. 21, 22. I backed away from the door, my legs trembling. His voice was calm, methodical, as if he were reciting a prayer, but there was nothing sacred about that ritual. 30, 31, 32. I sat back on the bed, trying to calm my breathing. Maybe it was just a joke. Maybe he was nervous too. It was our first week of marriage. Perhaps it was just a strange way to what? I couldn't find a logical explanation. 40, 41, 42. I closed my eyes, my hands clasped tightly together. The voice continued, inexorable, marking the numbers like a metronome. Time seemed to have stopped, yet rushed by too quickly. 50, 51, 52. I was halfway there. 50 more numbers to go. 50 numbers before what? What would happen at 100? The question tormented me. It made me want to scream, to open that door and demand what the hell he was doing. But I didn't. Something held me pinned to that bed, paralyzed by fear. 60, 61, 62. Tears started to fall. I didn't know why I was crying. Nothing had happened yet. But my body knew. My instinct knew. That counting was not innocent. It was a warning. It was the prelude to something terrible. 70, 71, 72. I lay down on the bed, curling into myself. I wanted to disappear. I wanted that moment to end, for that voice to stop, for everything to go back to normal. But the voice continued, relentless. 80, 81, 82. Only 20 numbers left, 20 numbers before the end, or the beginning. I didn't know what to think anymore. My brain couldn't process anything anymore, except that voice and those numbers getting closer and closer to 100. 90, 91, 92. My breath became shallow, ragged. My heart was beating so hard I thought it would explode in my chest. My hands gripped the sheet so tightly that my knuckles turned white. 96, 97, 98. The world around me vanished. There was no room, no bed, nothing left but that voice and those numbers. 99. I stopped breathing, and then, after a silence that felt like an eternity, 100. The door opened. Larry entered the room with an expression I had never seen before. He was no longer the gentle man I had married. He was something different, something cold, something ruthless. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw what my life was about to become. I saw the fear that would accompany me for years. I saw the prison I had just entered, without even realizing it. "Good girl," he said with a smile that chilled my blood. "You waited until the end." I didn't understand. I didn't understand what he meant. I didn't understand why he had counted to 100. I didn't understand why he was looking at me that way. But I was about to find out, and that discovery would change everything. That night, I learned what that counting meant. I learned that the 100 seconds were the time he granted me to prepare. Prepare for what? To endure, to be used, to be violated in the most intimate and painful way possible. The count was his way of warning me, of giving me the time to accept the inevitable. But there was nothing to accept. There was no choice. There was only the waiting, and then the horror. That night, I cried silently while he did what he wanted. My body was there, but my mind was elsewhere, trying to escape that unbearable reality. When he finished, he turned away and fell asleep, as if nothing had happened. And I lay there, awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this would be the rest of my life. The answer came the next night, when I heard his voice from the other side of the door again. 1. And I understood. It hadn't been an isolated incident. It was a ritual that would repeat again and again and again. The count to 100 had become the soundtrack to my nightmare, the sound that announced my daily destruction. As the weeks passed, I began to know that ritual in minute detail. I knew that if, when he reached 100, I wasn't ready, if I still had clothes on, if I wasn't lying on the bed waiting, things would be worse, much worse. I learned this one evening when, tired and confused, I had forgotten to take off my dress. When he walked in and saw me still dressed, his gaze hardened. He didn't say anything, but his hands spoke for him. That night, in addition to the violation, there were also the bruises. Bruises that I hid under long sleeves. Bruises that reminded me every day that I had to obey, that I had to be ready, that there was no room for error. I started to live based on that count. I listened to his every movement, his every glance, trying to figure out when the moment would arrive. Sometimes days passed without anything happening, and I would begin to hope that maybe, just maybe, it was over. But then, when I least expected it, I would hear that voice again. 1. And everything would begin again. The worst part wasn't even the physical violence, it was the waiting. It was those 100 seconds when I knew exactly what was about to happen, but could do nothing to stop it. It was the feeling of being powerless, trapped, with no way out. It was knowing that even if I screamed, no one would hear me. Even if I ran, I had nowhere to go. Even if I asked for help, who would believe me? In those years, these things were not discussed. A wife was supposed to endure, she was supposed to obey, she was supposed to be grateful to have a roof over her head and a husband who supported her. It didn't matter if that husband was destroying her, little by little, night after night. I tried to talk to my mother once. I went to visit her and found the courage to tell her I wasn't happy, that Larry scared me. But she looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Patricia, marriage isn't always easy. Men have their needs. It's our duty as wives." And I understood that I wouldn't find help from her. Not because she didn't love me, but because she had lived the same thing herself, and she had learned to endure in silence. I tried talking to the town pastor. I told him my husband was hurting me, that I was afraid, but he merely told me to pray, to be a better wife, to forgive. Marriage is sacred, Patricia. You can't break it over temporary difficulties. Temporary. As if what I was living through was a passing phase, as if one day Larry would wake up and stop counting to 100. And so I remained silent. I stayed in that house, in that prison, enduring night after night. I counted the days, the weeks, the months. Time passed, but nothing changed. In fact, it got worse. Larry became more demanding, more violent. The count came more often, and I became emptier, more and more, a hollow shell of who I had been. But then something shifted. One evening, while Larry was out for work, I found myself rummaging through his belongings. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was looking for answers. Maybe I was looking for a way to understand why he was doing this to me. And I found something. I found a letter, old, yellowed, hidden at the bottom of a drawer. It was written by his mother, Linda, addressed to his father, Kenneth, and as I read it, my blood ran cold. In the letter, Linda described the very same thing, the same count, the same ritual, the same fears. Linda had lived what I was living, and Kenneth had done to her what Larry was doing to me. It was a family inheritance, a horror passed down from father to son, a cycle of violence repeating generation after generation. And I understood. I understood that Larry hadn't invented that ritual. He had learned it. He had seen it, perhaps heard it when he was a child. And now he was replicating it on me, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. But I also understood something else. I understood that if I didn't do something, that cycle would never be broken. And if one day we had a son, he would learn the same thing. He would see his father count to 100, and he would think that was the right way to treat a woman. In that moment, something inside me broke. Or perhaps it awoke. I don't know. I just know that for the first time since I was married, I felt an emotion different from fear. I felt rage. I felt determination. I felt that I had to do something, that I had to find a way out of that situation, even if I didn't know how. That evening, when Larry came home, I looked at him differently. I no longer just saw my tormentor. I saw a broken man, a man who had learned to do evil because he knew nothing else. But this didn't excuse him. It didn't excuse anything he was doing to me. And when, that night, I heard his voice from the other side of the door starting to count again, something inside me whispered, "Not forever. This won't last forever. I will find a way. I must find a way. 1, 2, 3. But this time, while I listened to those numbers, there wasn't only fear. There was also a small, fragile seed of hope. The hope that one day that counting would end. That one day I would be free. I didn't know how yet. I didn't know when yet. But I knew I had to try. Because the alternative was to die slowly in that house, in that prison, fading away little by little until I was nothing. And I didn't want to die. I wanted to live. But wanting to live and knowing how to do it were two completely different things. In the days that followed, that letter became my obsession. I reread it secretly when Larry went out, searching between the lines for something that could help me, some clue about how his mother had faced that situation. But the more I read, the more the questions multiplied. The letter ended abruptly, as if it had been interrupted. And at the bottom, there were words that tormented me. If only I could leave. If only. If only what? What had she meant? And most importantly, what had happened to her afterwards? I started asking questions cautiously, without arousing suspicion. One evening, while I was making dinner, I asked Larry about his mother. "What was she like?" I asked, trying to maintain a light, almost nostalgic tone. He stiffened immediately. The silence that followed was heavy, menacing. Then, without looking at me, he said, "We don't talk about her." The tone allowed no reply. And I understood that I was touching a raw nerve, something painful, something hidden. But that reaction only fueled my curiosity. If Larry didn't want to talk about his mother, it meant there was something to hide. And I had to find out what. The opportunity came a few weeks later, when Larry had to leave for 3 days for work. Before leaving, he gave me his instructions, as always. What I should do, what I shouldn't do, who I could talk to, who I couldn't. "I don't want you leaving the house while I'm gone," he had said, staring intently into my eyes. "I don't want you talking to anyone. Do you understand?" I nodded, obediently, but a plan was already forming inside me. As soon as I saw his car disappear down the road, I waited another hour just to be sure he wouldn't come back for some reason. Then, with my heart racing, I grabbed my shawl and left the house. I hadn't been out alone in months. The fresh air on my face felt almost foreign, as if it belonged to another life, another Patricia. I walked towards the town, keeping off the main road, using the paths I had known since I was a child. I didn't want anyone to see me, no one to report to Larry that I had gone out. I arrived at the town square mid-morning. It was market day, and there were many people. I suddenly felt vulnerable, exposed, as if everyone could see what was happening to me, as if my secret were written on my forehead. But no one looked at me. No one noticed the woman with the shawl walking with her head down among the stalls. And that was exactly what I wanted. I looked for the man I was searching for. Donald, an older friend of my father, a person who knew everyone and everything in town. If there was anyone who could tell me something about Larry's mother, Linda, it was him. I found him by the fish stall, busy haggling over the price of anchovies. I approached cautiously, waiting for him to finish. When he saw me, his eyes lit up. "Patricia, what a surprise! It's been so long since I've seen you. How are you?" "Fine, Donald," I lied, trying to smile. "I only have a little time. I wanted to ask you something." His smile faded slightly, as if he sensed the tension in my voice. He took my arm and led me to a quieter corner of the square. "What is it, dear? You're pale. Are you really okay?" For a moment I was tempted to tell him everything, to break down right there, in that square, and tell him about the hell I was living. But I held back. Not yet. First, I had to understand. First, I had to know. "I wanted to ask you about Linda," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "Larry never talks about her, and I'd like to know something. What was she like? Did you know her?" Donald's expression changed immediately. His eyes became cautious, almost fearful. He looked around, as if to make sure no one was listening. Then, lowering his voice, he said, "Patricia, why are you asking me this? Does Larry know you're here asking questions?" "No," I admitted. "He doesn't want to talk about it, but I need to know." Donald looked at me for a long time, as if evaluating how much to tell me. Then he sighed heavily. "Come on," he said, taking my arm again. "Not here. Come to my house." I followed him through the narrow streets of the town to his small house near the church. Once inside, he carefully closed the door and had me sit at the kitchen table. He quietly made 2 cups of coffee, and I waited, my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, he sat down across from me and began to speak. Linda was a beautiful, vibrant woman, full of life. When she married Larry's father, Kenneth, she was young, with many dreams. But those dreams died quickly. He paused, as if searching for the right words. "Kenneth, he was a difficult man, very difficult. People said he had a violent temper, that things weren't right at home. But you know how these things are, Patricia. People talk, they whisper, but no one does anything. It's a family matter, they say. You don't interfere." "What happened to her?" I asked, my voice trembling. Donald looked up at me, and in that gaze I saw compassion mixed with fear. "Linda tried to leave, once. She packed her bags, took the child, Larry was small then, and ran away. She went to her sister's, in another town. But Kenneth found her. He brought her back. And after that," Donald shook his head. "After that, she was never the same. She became silent, a shadow of herself. She didn't go out anymore. She didn't talk to anyone anymore." "And then," I insisted, even though inside I already felt the weight of what he was about to tell me. "She died. They said she fell down the stairs. A domestic accident. But there were rumors, Patricia. Rumors that said it wasn't an accident. That her husband. But there was no proof. No one really investigated. And a few months later, Kenneth also died. Heart attack, they said. And Larry was left alone." The coffee in my cup had gone cold. Linda had tried to run away, exactly as I was planning to do, and they had brought her back. And then, she had died. "Donald," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Do you think Larry—" "That he knows? That he saw?" Donald looked at me with eyes full of sadness. "Patricia, a child who grows up in a house like that sees things they should never see. They learn things they should never learn." He paused, then added, "Why are you asking me this? Is something wrong? Is Larry—" I nodded slowly, tears starting to fall, and for the first time since I was married, I said the truth out loud. "Yes, he hurts me, every night, and I don't know what to do." Donald got up and came to sit next to me, hugging me as I cried. "Oh dear, I knew it. I saw it in your eyes. You've become just like Linda, like a ghost." "What can I do?" I asked, desperate. "If I run, he will find me. If I stay, he will destroy me. There's no way out." Donald remained silent for a long moment. Then he said, "There is always a way out, Patricia. You just have to find it. But you have to be clever. You have to plan. You can't do what Linda did, running away on impulse. You have to prepare everything. You have to have a place to go. You have to make sure he can't find you." "But where?" I asked, feeling even more desperate. "I have no money. I have nowhere to go. My mother wouldn't help me. And even if I ran away, where could I go where he wouldn't find me?" "We'll figure it out," Donald said, with a firmness that surprised me. "I will help you, but you have to promise me that you'll be careful. That you won't do anything impulsive. That you will wait for the right moment." I promised, even though deep down I knew that waiting meant enduring again. It meant more nights, more counts to 100, more violations. But perhaps Donald was right. Perhaps the only way out of that situation was to plan, to be patient, to wait for the right opportunity. I returned home before Larry did, my heart lighter but also heavier at the same time. Knowing that someone believed me, that someone was willing to help me, gave me hope. But knowing what had happened to Linda, knowing that she had tried and failed, filled me with terror. That evening, as I was preparing dinner, I found myself thinking about young Larry. How terrible it must have been for him to grow up in that house, to see his mother suffer, perhaps even to hear that cursed counting through the walls. How much pain he must have felt when she died, how much guilt, how much resentment. But then I stopped myself. I was justifying him. I was trying to understand, to rationalize, and that was dangerous, because it didn't matter how much he had suffered as a child. It didn't excuse what he was doing to me now. It didn't excuse the counts, the violence, the prison he had locked me in. Larry returned after 3 days, as expected. He looked at me with suspicion as soon as he entered, as if he could sense that something had changed. "What did you do while I was gone?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Nothing," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I stayed here, just like you told me." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. But that evening, when I heard his voice from the other side of the door begin to count, there was something different in his tone. It was slower, more menacing, as if he wanted to punish me for something I hadn't done but that he suspected. 1, 2, 3. But as I listened to those numbers, there wasn't only fear. There was also determination. I had talked to Donald. I knew what had happened to Linda, and I knew I wouldn't meet the same end. I would find a way. I had to find a way. In the following days, I began to plan, cautiously, without arousing suspicion. I put aside small sums of money when I did the grocery shopping, hiding them in a jar under the sink. I tried to memorize Larry's schedule, when he went out, when he came back, his patterns, his habits. I observed, I listened, I learned, and I continued to see Donald when I could. We always met in different places, always briefly, always carefully. He told me he had a cousin who lived in a distant city, who could perhaps host me for a while. He told me I needed to get documents, money, a train ticket. He told me I had to wait for the right moment when Larry was away for several days, so I would have a head start. But while I was planning the escape, something unexpected happened. One evening, while Larry was asleep, I heard a noise coming from the attic. A noise I had never heard before, like a scratching, as if something or someone was moving up there. I got out of bed cautiously, trying not to wake Larry. I went up the attic stairs, my heart pounding hard. I hadn't been up there in months. Larry had told me it was full of old junk, that there was nothing interesting. But now, as I climbed those steps, I felt that I was about to discover something. I didn't know what, but I felt it. I opened the attic door and lit the small oil lamp I always kept with me. The flickering light illuminated the room, full of boxes, old dust-covered furniture, cobwebs. And at the back, against the wall, I saw something that chilled my blood. It was an old, dark wooden trunk with a rusty padlock, and above the trunk, etched into the wood with what looked like a knife, were words. I approached, the lamp trembling in my hand, and read, "Help me, he keeps me here. Linda." The world around me stopped. Linda, Larry's mother. She had been here, in this attic, and she had carved those words, a desperate cry for help that no one had ever heard. With trembling hands, I tried to open the padlock, but it was locked, rusted with time. I looked around, searching for something to pry it open, and I found an old screwdriver. I used it to pry, and after several attempts, the padlock yielded with a metallic click. I opened the trunk slowly, not knowing what to expect, and what I found inside took my breath away. There were clothes, old, stained women's clothes, and beneath the clothes, letters. Dozens of letters, all written by the same hand, all addressed to different people, her sister, her mother, friends. Letters pleading for help, describing the horror she was living, asking someone, anyone, to take her away from that house. But none of those letters had ever been mailed. They were there, in the trunk, hidden, silenced. Like Linda's voice had been silenced. Like her life had been silenced. And at the bottom of the trunk, I found something that gave me shivers. It was a journal. Linda's journal. I picked it up with trembling hands and began to read. The first pages were full of hope, of dreams, of love. She described her marriage, the birth of Larry, her happiness. But then, the pages grew darker. She began to describe the change in her husband, Kenneth, the violence, the counts. Yes, she too had lived the same thing. Kenneth counted to 100, exactly as Larry was doing to me now. I continued reading, tears streaming down onto the journal, blurring the words. Linda described her escape, her failure, the forced return, and then the final pages. The pages most filled with despair. He keeps me locked in the attic. He says I have to learn, that I have to understand that there is no escape. Larry is crying downstairs. I can hear him. My son, my little one. He doesn't know where I am. He thinks I left him, that I abandoned him. But I'm here, right above him, and I can't do anything. The last page was dated the day before her death. Today I've decided. I can't take it anymore. When he opens that door, I will go down those stairs, and I won't stop. I'd rather die falling than live one more day in this prison. I closed the journal, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would explode. Linda hadn't fallen accidentally. She had thrown herself down. She had chosen death rather than continue living in that house with that man in that hell. And in that moment, I heard a sound behind me. I spun around abruptly, the lamp nearly falling from my hand. Larry was in the attic doorway, and he was looking at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was a mixture of anger, pain, and something dark I couldn't decipher. "You found her journal," he said, his voice flat, emotionless. I couldn't answer. Fear had paralyzed me. He walked towards me slowly, and I backed away until I was against the trunk. My father, Kenneth, told me she had left, that she had abandoned us. But I knew. I always knew she was here, in this attic. I heard her crying, I heard her begging, and I did nothing. His voice cracked slightly, and for a moment I saw the child he had been, the boy who had heard his mother suffer and couldn't help her. And when she died, he continued, my father told me it was her fault, that if she had been a better, more obedient wife, it wouldn't have happened. And I believed him. I believed him all these years. He stopped in front of me, and our eyes met, until I married you, and I realized that maybe it wasn't her fault. For an instant, just an instant, I thought he would apologize, that he would understand, that everything would change. But then his gaze hardened again, and he said, "But it's too late to change now. This is who I am. This is what my father taught me, and this is what it will always be." He turned and walked down the stairs, leaving me there alone with Linda's journal and the weight of an unbearable truth. And I understood. I understood that there was no hope that Larry would change. I understood that I couldn't save him. I could only save myself. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed seated on the attic floor until dawn, with Linda's journal clutched to my chest, reading and rereading those pages until I had them memorized. Every word was a piece of the puzzle coming together in my mind. Every phrase was a warning, a lesson Linda was teaching me from the grave. She had failed because she had acted on impulse, because she hadn't had a plan, because she had run away without thinking about the consequences, and I wouldn't make the same mistake. When I came down from the attic, Larry was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. He didn't look at me. He didn't say anything. It was as if the scene from the night before had never happened, and I understood that this, too, was part of his game. To ignore, to pretend nothing happened, to force me to doubt myself, to wonder if I had really seen what I had seen, heard what I had heard. But I wouldn't yield. Not this time. In the days that followed, I became a ghost in my own house. I did the chores, prepared the meals, smiled when necessary. But my mind was elsewhere, always focused on the plan. Donald had told me his cousin was willing to host me, but he lived far away, several hours by train. I would need money, documents, and most importantly, time. Time to reach the station, time to get on the train, time before Larry realized I was gone. I began to study his movements even more closely. Larry had a job that took him away once a month for at least 4 days. That would be my window. 4 days head start before he noticed I was no longer there waiting for him. But there was a critical problem. Larry kept all the important documents, including mine, locked in a safe in his study. A safe whose combination only he knew. Without my papers, I couldn't travel. I couldn't rent a room. I couldn't rebuild a life. I had to find a way to open that safe. One evening, while he was in his armchair reading the newspaper, I brought him coffee as I always did. "Larry," I said in a timid, submissive voice, "I need my identification card. I have to go to the city hall to renew a certificate." He looked at me with suspicion. "What certificate?" "The residency certificate," I lied. "They asked for it for the library card." He remained silent for a moment, studying me. Then he got up and went into his study. I followed him, my heart pounding hard. I watched him open the safe, turn the combination 3, 27, 12, 46, and take out my ID card. He handed it to me without saying anything, then closed the safe and left the room. 3, 27, 12, 46. I repeated the numbers in my mind again and again, etching them into my memory just as Linda had carved those words onto the trunk. I couldn't afford to forget them. They were the key to my freedom. The next day, as soon as Larry left for work, I rushed into his study. With trembling hands, I turned the safe dial. 3, 27, 12, 46. Click. The safe opened. Inside were papers, documents, money. I took my documents, ID card, birth certificate, marriage certificate, and hid them under the mattress in the guest room, a room Larry never used. Then, with a courage I didn't know I possessed, I also took some cash. Not much, just enough that I thought he wouldn't notice immediately. Enough for the train ticket and a few days of survival. I closed the safe and returned to my chores, my heart beating so hard I was afraid Larry could hear it when he came home. But he didn't notice anything, or so I believed. That evening, when I heard his voice from the other side of the door begin to count, there was something different. The count was slower, more deliberate, as if each number was a punishment. 1, a very long pause. 2, another pause. 3, I realized what he was doing. He was prolonging the torture, extending the waiting, making me suffer even more. Because he knew. Somehow he knew I was planning something. But I couldn't go back now. I was too close. Larry was scheduled to leave in less than 2 weeks. 2 weeks, and I would be free. I just had to hold on. Just hold on a little longer. The days passed with agonizing slowness. Every morning I woke up hoping it was already the day of his departure. Every night I fell asleep, when I managed to fall asleep, counting the days left. 14, 13, 12. I continued to see Donald, always in secret, always with caution. I gave him my documents, asking him to hold them for me. When the time is right, I told him, I will ask for them, and you will give them to me, and I will disappear. Be careful, Patricia, he said, squeezing my hands. Men like Larry don't easily let go of what they consider their property. If he suspects something— I know, I interrupted, but I have no choice. It's this or die like Linda. 8 days before Larry's scheduled departure, something happened that changed everything. I was at the market, grocery shopping as I did every week. As I was picking out vegetables, I heard someone call my name. Patricia, is that you? I turned around and saw a man I hadn't seen in years. Robert, an old friend of my father, a kind man who had always treated me like a daughter. Robert, I said, surprised. What a pleasure to see you. We talked for a few minutes. He asked how I was, how married life was going. And I lied, as always, saying everything was wonderful. But he looked at me strangely, as if he could see past my lies. Patricia, he said finally, lowering his voice, if you ever need help for anything, you know where to find me, right? I nodded, touched by his kindness. Thank you, Robert. I do. I didn't think much of that encounter, at least not immediately. But that evening when I got home, I found Larry waiting for me at the door, with an expression that froze my blood. Where were you? He asked, his voice dangerously calm. At the market, I replied, showing the grocery bags. Like every week. How long were you gone? The usual, 2 hours, maybe 3. 3 hours to buy groceries? The tone had become harsher. Who were you talking to? My heart stopped. He had seen me, or someone had reported me to him. No one, I lied. Just the vendors, haggling prices. He approached slowly, and I backed away until I was against the wall. Don't lie to me, Patricia. I saw you talking to someone. A man. Who was it? It was Robert, I admitted, trying to keep my voice steady. An old friend of my father. He just said hello, nothing more. And what did you talk about? His face was inches from mine, his eyes full of a rage I had never seen before. Nothing, just how I was, trivial things. Liar, he yelled, and his hand rose. I closed my eyes, expecting the blow, but it didn't come. When I reopened them, I saw that his fist was clenched, trembling, as if he were fighting against himself not to strike me. Go to the bedroom, he said, his voice hoarse. And don't come out until I come for you. I ran up the stairs, my body shaking uncontrollably. I heard the bedroom door close behind me, and then the sound of the key turning in the lock. He had locked me in, just like his father, Kenneth, had done to Linda. I ran to the window, trying to open it, but it was sealed. Larry must have sealed it when I wasn't looking. I was trapped, completely trapped. Hours passed. I didn't know exactly how long, because there was no clock in the room. It could have been 3 hours, it could have been 6. The sun set, and the room filled with darkness. And I stayed there, sitting on the bed, waiting, knowing that sooner or later he would come upstairs, and that what would happen would be worse than all the times before. And then, in the silence of the night, I heard him. The sound of his footsteps on the stairs. He stopped outside the door, and he began to count. But this time it was different. This time the count was whispered, almost imperceptible, but precisely because of that, even more terrifying. 1, 2, 3. I got off the bed, desperately searching for something, anything I could use to defend myself. But the room was bare. There was nothing. 20, 21, 22. I looked at the window again. Maybe if I broke the glass, if I screamed, someone would hear me. But we were so isolated. There was no one nearby. And even if someone heard me, would they intervene? Or would they think, like everyone else, that it was just a family matter? 50, 51, 52. I thought of Linda, locked in that attic, desperate, with no way out. I thought of how she must have felt, counting the days, the hours, the minutes, waiting for an end that never came. I thought of how she had chosen to throw herself down those stairs rather than continue living like that. And I understood. I understood that if I didn't run now, that would be my end too. Not next week. Not the one I had planned for. But now, immediately. 80, 81, 82. I made a decision. When the door opened, when he came in, I would run. I didn't know how, but I would do it. Even if I had to push him, run, jump out the window, anything. But I wouldn't stay there waiting to be destroyed. 96, 97, 98. I positioned myself near the door, my body tense, ready to spring. 99. My breath hitched. 100. The key turned in the lock. The door opened slowly. And Larry appeared on the threshold. With that expression I now knew all too well. But I was ready. As soon as he took a step inside, I sprang. I pushed him with all the strength I had, catching him by surprise. He stumbled backward, and I ran out of the room, down the stairs, towards the front door. But he was faster. He grabbed my arm before I could reach the door, pulling me back violently. I fell to the floor, the breath knocked out of my lungs by the impact. "Where do you think you're going?" he hissed, bending over me. And in that moment, looking up at him, seeing the rage in his eyes, the determination, the madness, I understood something. I understood that I would never be able to escape. Not alone. Not like this. He was too strong, too careful, too controlling. I would need help. Real help. But from whom? Who would help me? And then I remembered. Robert, if you ever need help for anything, you know where to find me. "It's okay," I said, my voice broken by sobs. "It's okay, Larry. I won't run away, I promise. I won't run away." He looked at me for a long moment, trying to gauge if I was lying. Then he let me go and stood up. "Go back to the room," he said. "And never try to run away again. Never again. Do you understand?" I nodded and dragged myself up the stairs, every movement an agony. I entered the room and heard the door close behind me again, the key turning. But this time, as I lay on the bed, my body aching, my heart broken, there wasn't only despair. There was also a plan forming in my mind. A dangerous plan, perhaps a crazy one. But it was the only chance I had. I had to find a way to contact Robert. I had to let him know what was happening, and I had to do it without Larry finding out. The next day, Larry let me out of the room. He didn't say anything about what had happened the night before. He returned to his routine as if nothing had happened, and I did the same, playing the part of the obedient, submissive wife. But inside me, something was growing. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was rage. It was determination. It was the certainty that I wouldn't spend the rest of my life like this, that I would find a way, that I would survive. 2 days later, while Larry was at work, I left the house with the excuse of needing to go to the drugstore. But instead of going to the drugstore, I went directly to Donald's house on the opposite side of town. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. He opened it, surprised to see me. "Patricia? What are you doing here?" "I need help," I said, and my voice broke. "Please, Donald, I need help." He immediately ushered me inside, carefully closing the door. "What happened? Are you hurt?" And so, for the second time in my life, I spoke the truth out loud. I told Donald everything. The counts, the violence, Linda, the journal, the attic, everything. When I finished, he was pale, utterly shaken. "Patricia, this is... My God, you have to leave, now." "I know, but I can't do it alone. I need help. I need someone to help me reach the station, to make sure he doesn't follow me." Donald nodded, determined. "All right. When is he leaving for work?" "In 5 days." "Good. That day I will come for you, at the break of dawn, when he is already gone. I'll take you to the station, put you on that train, and you will go far away from here. Far away from him." For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Real hope. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you, Donald." "You don't have to thank me. I should have realized sooner. I should have seen the signs. But now I will. I will help you." I returned home before Larry did, my heart lighter. 5 more days. Only 5 days and I would be free. I just had to hold on a little longer. Just a little. But that evening, when Larry returned from work, he looked at me strangely. "Did you go to the drugstore today?" he asked. "Yes," I lied. "Strange, because I called the drugstore and they said they didn't see you." The blood froze in my veins. He had checked on me. He had called to verify my story. "Maybe they were mistaken," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There were a lot of people." He didn't say anything, but his look was eloquent. He didn't believe me. And he knew I was hiding something. That night, there was no counting. Larry stayed awake, sitting in the armchair in the living room watching me, as if he knew I was planning to run away and wanted to make sure I couldn't. And I realized that the next 5 days would be the most dangerous of my life. The 5 days that followed were the longest of my life. Larry never took his eyes off me. He followed me from one room to another, observed my every movement, listened to my every word. It was like living under a magnifying glass, every breath analyzed, every gesture suspicious. I didn't leave the house anymore. I didn't talk to anyone. I had become a prisoner in my own existence, and Larry was my silent warden. The first night was the worst. I expected him to resume his counts, to enter the room with that ruthless expression. But he didn't. He remained seated in the armchair in the living room, motionless like a statue, his eyes fixed on our bedroom door. He knew I was there, awake, terrified. And that was exactly what he wanted. Control wasn't just physical. It was psychological, emotional, total. On the second day, I started to lose hope. How could I run away with him watching me like this? Donald would come in 3 days at the break of dawn. But what if Larry didn't leave for work? What if he changed his plans? What if he stayed home exactly that day? I tried to act as normally as possible. I cooked, I cleaned, I smiled when necessary. But inside me, there was a chaos of emotions: fear, anger, despair, a small, stubborn glimmer of hope that refused to die. On the 3rd day, something unexpected happened. We had a visitor. It was Sharon, my younger sister, whom I hadn't seen in months. She knocked on the door mid-afternoon with a bright smile and a basket of homemade cookies. Larry opened the door, and his gaze immediately hardened. "Sharon," he said without warmth. "What are you doing here?" "I came to visit my sister," she replied, with a confidence I had always lacked. "Is that a problem?" "No, of course not," Larry said, but his tone suggested otherwise. "Come in." Sharon hugged me tightly, and in that moment I felt how much I had missed her, how much I needed that human contact, that affection. "Patricia, how are you? You look so thin." "I'm fine," I lied, trying to smile. But Sharon wasn't stupid. She looked into my eyes, and I saw that she understood, that she saw past my lies, past my pretenses. "Can we talk? Alone?" she asked, looking at Larry. "I have to go out for an hour," he said, grabbing his jacket. But before leaving, he came close to me and whispered, so quietly that only I could hear, "Don't do anything foolish. I'll be back soon." It was a clear warning. I wasn't to tell Sharon anything. As soon as he left, my sister took my hands. "Patricia, what's going on? You're different. You're extinguished." Tears started to flow before I could stop them. "Sharon, I can't. Is he hurting you?" she asked, her voice trembling with anger. "Is that bastard hurting you?" I nodded, unable to speak. "Then you have to leave, now. Come with me, before he comes back." "I can't," I said, wiping my tears. "It's not that simple. He would find me. He would bring me back. It already happened to his mother, Linda." "So what will you do? Will you stay here forever? Will you let him destroy you?" "No, I have a plan. In 2 days. Someone will help me. But you have to promise me you won't tell anyone. If he finds out—" Sharon looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. But if something goes wrong, if you need help, you call me. Do you understand? No matter what happens, I will come for you." She hugged me again, and I stayed there, in her arms, allowing myself for a moment to be weak, to be scared, to be who I truly was, and not the mask I wore for Larry. When he returned, Sharon left, but not before giving Larry a look of pure hatred. He didn't say anything, but that evening the tension in the house was palpable. He moved through the rooms like a predator, and I was his prey. That night, the counting returned, but this time it was different. This time, Larry counted sitting on the bed, next to me, whispering each number directly into my ear. 1, 2, 3. His breath on my neck sent shivers down my spine. His closeness was suffocating, oppressive. 20, 21, 22. I closed my eyes, trying to go to that place in my mind where he couldn't reach me, but it was getting harder and harder to find. 50, 51, 52. "Did you enjoy yourself today with your sister?" he whispered suddenly, interrupting the count. "Did you tell her our secrets?" "No," I said, my voice barely a thread. "I didn't tell her anything." "Liar," he hissed, and he started counting again, even more slowly. 53, 54, 55. When he reached 100, that night was one of the worst I had ever lived. Not just for what he did, but for how he did it, with a cold, calculated rage, as if he wanted to punish me for something I hadn't done but that he suspected. The 4th day arrived, and I was exhausted, physically and mentally. Tomorrow. Tomorrow Larry would leave. Tomorrow I would run away. I just had to hold on one more day. Just one. But that morning, as I was making breakfast, Larry came downstairs with a suitcase and said something that froze my blood. I canceled the trip. The world around me stopped. "What?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "The business trip. I canceled it. I decided it's better to stay here, with you." He looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Was it a test? Did he know about my plan? Or was it just a terrible coincidence? "But your work," I stammered. "Work can wait. You are more important." He came closer, placing a hand on my face in a gesture that might have seemed affectionate, but was instead possessive, menacing. "You wouldn't want me to leave, would you?" "No, of course not," I lied. And I understood. I understood that he knew. He didn't know the details. He didn't know about Donald or the exact plan, but he knew I was plotting something, and he had canceled the trip to prevent me from escaping. I was finished. There was no way out anymore, or so I thought. That evening, while Larry was in the bathroom, I heard a noise at the kitchen window. I approached cautiously and saw Sharon. She was throwing pebbles against the glass to get my attention. I motioned for her to wait, checked that Larry was still in the bathroom, then quickly opened the window. "What are you doing here?" I whispered. "I came to get you," she said. "Now. That window is big enough. You can get out of there. My car is around the corner. Let's go." "I can't. He's here." "He'll hear me." "Then we'll make some noise," my sister said, with that determination I lacked. "In 5 minutes, I'll knock something over at the back of the house. When he goes to check, you climb out this window and run to the car, all right? Sharon, it's too dangerous. If he finds you, he won't find me. Trust me, Patricia, this is your only chance. Are you taking it or not?" I looked at my sister, so brave, so willing to risk everything for me, and I realized she was right. This was my only chance. If I stayed, I would die. If not physically, then inside. Like Linda. "All right," I said. 5 minutes. I closed the window and returned to the kitchen, pretending to be busy. My heart was beating so hard I thought Larry could hear it from where he was. Every second felt like an eternity. 1, 2, 3. I counted in my mind, just as he had done to me so many times. And then, the noise. A loud crash, as if someone had knocked over garbage cans. Larry rushed out of the bathroom. "What was that?" "I don't know," I said, with fake concern. "It came from outside." He went towards the back door, and I waited, my body taut as a violin string. As soon as I saw him step outside, I ran to the kitchen window, opened it, and began to climb out. It was harder than I thought. My hands slipped, my body was weak from months of mistreatment. But fear gave me strength. Desperation gave me courage. I managed to get out, falling awkwardly on the other side, scraping my knees on the cement. But I didn't stop. I got up and ran like I hadn't run in years, towards the corner where Sharon had told me the car was. And there it was, the engine already running, my sister at the wheel. "Get in!" she shouted. I got in, and she immediately drove off, the tires screeching on the asphalt. I looked back and saw Larry coming out of the house, seeing us drive away. His face was a mask of pure rage. He started running after the car, but we were already too far away. "It's done," Sharon said, with a trembling smile. "You're free, Patricia." But I couldn't smile. I couldn't feel free, because I knew it wasn't over. Larry would look for me. He would find me. And when he did... "Where are we going?" I asked. "To Donald's. I spoke to him this morning. He knows what to do. He'll take you somewhere safe, far away from here." We arrived at Donald's house a few minutes later. He was waiting for us at the door with a serious expression. "Get inside, quick." Once inside, he explained the plan. "I have a friend who has a house in the mountains, isolated. No one knows it exists, not even in the official records. You can stay there for a while until we find a more permanent solution." "But he'll look for me," I said, my voice trembling. "Larry will look for me." "I know, but he won't find you. I promise you, he won't find you." That night, we left. Donald was driving, Sharon and I in the back seat. We drove for hours, through winding mountain roads, until we reached a small house hidden among the trees. It was rustic, simple, but it seemed like a palace compared to the prison I had escaped. "You'll be safe here," Donald said. "I left supplies. There's wood for the fire. In a few days, I'll come back with more things. But for now, stay here. Don't go out. Don't let anyone see you." Sharon hugged me tightly. "I'll be back soon," she said. "And when things have calmed down, we'll find a way for you to start over. A new life, Patricia. A real life." I watched them drive away, and for the first time in months, I was alone. Truly alone. Without Larry, without the Counts, without the fear. And I didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. I went into the house and sat down on the small sofa. The silence was deafening. For so long I had lived in terror of the noise. Larry's footsteps, his voice counting, his violent hands. And now, in the silence, I didn't know what to do. I got up and looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. She was thin, pale, with tired, frightened eyes, but she was alive. She was free. Or at least, she was starting to be. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without waking up every half hour in a panic. I slept deeply, without dreams, without nightmares. And when I woke up the next morning, with the sun filtering through the curtains, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. But hope was fragile, and I discovered this a few days later. Donald returned as promised, with more supplies and some news. "Larry is looking for you," he said, his face serious. "He reported you missing. He says you're ill, that you need care. He has convinced some people that you are in danger." "And the police?" I asked, panic returning. "They are not looking for you, not yet, but you have to be careful. If he finds you—" "I know," I said. "If he finds me, he'll bring me back, or worse." Weeks passed, weeks in which I lived in that house, hidden, isolated, but free. Donald and Sharon visited me regularly, bringing me food, news of the outside world, comfort. But there was always that fear, that thought that Larry might find me, that he might take me away from that fragile peace I had found. And one night, the fear became reality. I heard a noise outside, footsteps on the gravel. I got out of bed, my heart pounding. I looked out the window and saw him. Larry. He was there, in front of the house, looking towards the windows. How had he found me? How had he discovered where I was? I hid in the darkest corner of the room, trying not to make a sound, not to breathe. I heard the doorknob turn. He was trying to get in, and then, his voice, from the other side of the door. "Patricia. I know you're there. Open the door." I didn't answer. I didn't move. "Patricia, come home. Come back to me. We can fix things. I promise it will be different." Lies. They were all lies. It would never be different. "If you don't open, I'll come in anyway. And when I do, things will be worse for you." I looked around, desperately searching for something, anything. And I saw the phone. Donald had left one for emergencies. With trembling hands, I called the number he had given me. "Donald," I whispered when he answered. "He's here. Larry is here." "I'm coming," he said. "Hold on. Don't open that door." But Larry wasn't waiting anymore. I heard the sound of glass shattering. He was coming in through the window. I ran towards the back door, but he was faster. He grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "Did you really think you could escape from me?" he hissed. And in that moment, something inside me broke. Or perhaps, finally, it was set free. All the rage, all the fear, all the horror I had lived through exploded outwards. "No!" I screamed, and for the first time in my life, I fought back. I pushed him, I scratched him. I fought with every ounce of strength I had. I was no longer the submissive woman I had been. I was no longer the silent victim. He was surprised by my reaction. He lost his grip for a moment, and I took advantage of it. I ran out of the house, into the night, not knowing where I was going, knowing only that I had to get away. He followed me, but I knew those woods by now. I had explored them in the weeks I had been there. I ran among the trees, hiding, moving silently. And then I heard other voices, flashlight beams. Donald had arrived, and he had brought help. Sharon, other men from the town, people who had decided to believe my story, to help me. "Larry!" Donald shouted. "It's over!" "Get out, or we're calling the police." There was a long silence. Then I heard Larry's footsteps retreating. He was leaving. For now. I came out of my hiding place, and Donald embraced me. "It's done, Patricia," It's truly done. We will never leave you alone again." But I knew it wasn't really over. Not yet. Larry had left that night, but I knew him well enough to know he wouldn't give up so easily. A man who had built his entire existence on control would not release his grip without a final fight. In the days that followed, Donald organized everything with a precision that moved me. "You can't live hidden anymore," he told me. "You have to face him legally. You have to report him." The word report terrified me. It meant telling everything, exposing myself, showing the whole world what I had lived through. It meant admitting out loud, in front of strangers, the hell I had suffered. But Donald was right. It was the only way to be truly free. With the help of Sharon and a lawyer Donald knew, we prepared the complaint. It was one of the hardest moments of my life. Sitting in that cold office, with those eyes watching me, I had to tell everything. The counts to 100, the violence, Linda's attic, the bruises, the fear. Every word was like tearing away a piece of myself, exposing wounds I had tried to hide for so long. The lawyer listened carefully, taking notes. "We'll need evidence," he said finally. "Testimonies, medical certificates if you have them, anything that can support your story." "The journal," I said suddenly. "Linda's journal. It's still in the attic, and there's the carving on the trunk. They're proof that she too, that this is a repeating cycle." "We must recover it," the lawyer said. "But you can't go back there. I'll send someone with a court order." They were days of agonizing waiting. Every noise made me jump. Every shadow seemed like Larry. But Donald never left me alone. He and Sharon took turns, staying with me day and night, making sure I was safe. And then the news arrived. The police had gone to the house, recovered the journal, seen the carvings, and documented everything. And they found something else. They found more letters from Linda, hidden in different places in the house. Letters pleading for help, describing years of abuse, asking someone to save her. But the most important discovery was something else. When they examined Linda's death, they found discrepancies in the original report. They found testimonies from neighbors who had heard screams that night, but who had never been questioned. They found evidence suggesting that her death was not an accident, but something much darker. The case was reopened, and Larry's father, Kenneth, dead for years, was posthumously accused of homicide. He could no longer be punished, but the truth came out. Linda hadn't fallen. She had been pushed. Or worse, she had thrown herself to escape the imprisonment, just as she had written in her journal. When this news became public, the entire town was shaken. People started talking, remembering. Other memories emerged, other suspicions, other signs that everyone had ignored for years. And suddenly, I was no longer alone. I was no longer the crazy woman accusing her husband. I was a survivor of a horror that had deep roots, that had repeated itself generation after generation. The trial was long and painful. I had to testify, face Larry in court, look him in the eyes while I told them what he had done to me. But this time, I was different. I was no longer the terrified woman counting the seconds waiting for the door to open. I was a woman who had found her voice, who had chosen to fight. Larry defended himself, of course. He said I was the sick one, that I was making everything up, that I was just trying to destroy him. But the evidence spoke clearly. His mother's journal, the testimonies of Donald and Sharon, the medical certificates documenting my bruises, my injuries, and above all, the carvings on that trunk, that desperate cry for help from a woman no one had saved. The verdict came after months. Larry was convicted. Not only for what he had done to me, but also for the role he had played in his mother's death, for having known, for having seen, for never having spoken. He was sentenced to many years in prison, and I, finally, was legally free. But legal freedom was only the beginning. The true freedom, the inner one, would take much longer. The first months after the trial were strange. I still woke up at night, believing I could hear his voice counting. 1, 2, 3. It took me weeks to understand that it was only in my head, that he was no longer there, that he couldn't hurt me anymore. The trauma doesn't disappear with a sentence. It remains. It settles in the folds of your mind. It emerges when you least expect it. I started seeing a doctor, a kind woman who helped me understand that what I had lived through had a name. Domestic violence, spousal abuse, trauma. Words that used to scare me, that made me feel weak, broken. But she taught me that acknowledging the trauma was not weakness. It was the first step towards healing. The sessions were difficult. I had to relive every moment, every fear, every pain. But slowly I began to understand. I understood that it wasn't my fault, that I hadn't done anything to deserve what happened to me, that Larry was responsible for his actions, not me. Sharon was fundamental in those months. She came to see me almost every day, bringing me food, company, love. "You are the strongest woman I know," she told me once. "You survived hell and came out. Now you just have to learn to live again. Live again." It seemed like such a simple concept, yet it was the hardest of all. How do you live after life has been ripped away from you for so long? How do you learn to trust again, to smile again, to hope again? Slowly, one day at a time. I started with small things, a walk in the park without looking over my shoulder every 5 seconds. Dinner with Sharon and Donald, where I managed to genuinely laugh, not just pretend. A night where I slept without nightmares. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. I decided to stay in the house in the mountains for a while. It had become my refuge, my safe place. Donald helped me make it more welcoming, more mine. We planted flowers in the garden, painted the walls light colors, filled the empty spaces with life. And I started writing. I wrote everything, the fears, the memories, the dreams, the hopes. I wrote for myself, to free myself from everything that had remained trapped inside. And as I wrote, I began to understand something. My story wasn't just mine. It was Linda's story. It was the story of so many other women who had lived in silence, who had suffered without speaking, who had died without justice. One day, I made a decision. I would share my story. Not for pity, not for attention, but because perhaps, somewhere, there was another woman living what I had lived, and perhaps hearing that someone had survived, that someone had managed to escape, would give her the strength to do the same. I started speaking publicly, to support groups, to centers for women victims of violence. At first, it was terrifying. Every time I told my story, I felt like I was reliving those moments. But then, I saw the eyes of the women listening to me. I saw recognition, understanding, hope, and I understood that it was worth it. One woman, in particular, stuck with me. She came up to me after one of my talks, her eyes full of tears. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for speaking out. I live the same thing, and I thought I was alone. I thought I was crazy." I took her hands. "You are not alone, and you are not crazy, and you can get out. There are people who will help you. I will help you." And I helped her. With the help of Donald and local organizations, we managed to get her out of that situation, to give her a safe place to stay, to start her journey towards freedom. And that was one of the most significant moments of my life, because I understood that my pain, my trauma, could be transformed into something positive. It could be used to help other women, to save other lives. The years passed. Slowly, the weight on my chest lightened. The memories became less vivid, less painful. I learned to live with what had happened without letting it define me completely. I was Patricia, yes, the woman who had survived that hell. But I was also something else. I was a strong, resilient woman, capable of loving again, of hoping again. I met wonderful people along the way, women who, like me, had suffered, but who had gotten back up. Good men, like Donald, who showed me that not everyone was like Larry, that kindness, respect, and true love still existed. And one day, many years later, I received news. Larry had died in prison. A sudden heart attack, they told me. He was only 52 years old. When I heard the news, I waited to feel something. Relief, perhaps, or anger, or sadness. But I didn't feel any of those things. I only felt peace. Peace in knowing that he would never hurt anyone again. Peace in knowing that the cycle was finally broken, that there would not be another generation of men who learned to count to 100 before destroying the women they loved. Today, sitting here telling you this story, I am 79 years old. I live near the coast, in a small house full of light and life. I have my grandchildren, my flowers, my quiet mornings, and I have my story, which I no longer hide, which I am no longer ashamed to tell. I know there are women out there who are living what I lived. Women who hear those footsteps, who count those seconds, who wait for the door to open, knowing what will happen. And I want them to know that they are not alone, that there is hope, that you can get out. It won't be easy. It will be the hardest thing you have ever done. But it is worth it. Because on the other side of that fear, that pain, there is life, true life, the one you deserve, the one that was stolen from you. And if you are listening to this story and you recognize yourself in it, if the words I have spoken resonate within you, then take that first step. Talk to someone. Call a domestic violence center. Ask for help, because the most dangerous thing you can do is remain silent. Silence is what almost killed me. It's what killed Linda. But voice, the courage to speak, is what saved me. Thank you for listening to me today, for allowing me to share with you this intimate chapter of my life. If my story has touched you, please don't hesitate to leave a like on this video and subscribe to this channel to discover other testimonies like mine. And please share it, because who knows? Maybe someone going through a similar trial right now will find the courage to keep searching, to hope, to believe in the impossible. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from today? Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to me.